An American girl married an Arab millionaire, but he died in an accident. The next day, the investigation results shocked everyone. In the shiny city of Dubai, where tall buildings reached up to the sky and the desert whispered old secrets, Sophie stepped off the airplane, feeling both excited and nervous. The hot weather wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, so different from the cool air of her home in Montana, America. She had flown all the way across the world to attend her cousin Lily's wedding. It was going to be a big, fancy celebration, just like the city itself. Sophie, with her bright green eyes and dark hair like the night, felt a little out of place in this world full of luxury. But the excitement of seeing her cousin Lily marry a rich man made her forget about feeling awkward. The hotel where Sophie stayed looked like a palace, with fountains that danced and sparkling chandeliers. She got ready for the wedding, thinking about Ethan, her boyfriend of 5 years, who had stayed back in America. He didn't really care about her dreams. The wedding was like a fairy tale. Lily looked beautiful in her white dress, shining with pearls and diamonds that sparkled like stars. The groom, a kind man, looked at Lily as if she was the most important thing in the world. At the reception, with the air filled with the smell of spices and flowers, Sophie saw Omar for the first time. He moved through the crowd like a lion in the desert, with deep, dark eyes. When he looked at Sophie, it felt like time stopped. Lily, glowing with happiness, introduced them. "This is my husband's cousin, Omar. Meet my favorite cousin, Sophie," she said, smiling. Omar spoke English with an interesting accent, and they began talking. They shared stories about their different cultures, and before they knew it, hours had passed. They both felt like they had a special connection. As the evening went on, Sophie started thinking less about Ethan and more about Omar. Omar was kind, respectful, and interested in what Sophie had to say. Everything Ethan wasn't. Lily, who always paid attention, whispered to Sophie when Omar stepped away. "Do you see what you've been missing?" she said. "That man is worth 100 Ethans. Don't waste your life with someone who doesn't value you." Sophie felt her cousin's words like a warning bell. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine a life where her dreams weren't ignored. A life full of love, joy, and growth, not sadness. The week in Dubai felt like a dream. Every day was filled with new adventures. Rides in the desert, dinners in beautiful places, and deep conversations with Omar. He showed her a different side of Arab life, beyond what she had always heard. He talked about poetry, philosophy, and how his people had made important contributions to the world. Sophie saw in his eyes a respect for her that Ethan had never shown. Even though Sophie enjoyed her time with Omar, she still felt guilty. She had been with Ethan for so long. But the more time she spent with Omar, the more she saw what was missing in her life. On her last day in Dubai, at the airport, Sophie said goodbye to Lily and Omar. "Don't forget what you experienced here," Lily whispered. "You deserve happiness, cousin. Don't settle for less." Omar held Sophie's hands gently and said, "There's always an oasis waiting to be found. I hope you discover yours." His words stayed with her as she boarded the plane back to America. As the city of Dubai grew smaller under her, Sophie felt like she had left a part of herself behind, buried in the desert. Back in America, everything felt dull. The smells of food and the busy streets were not as exciting as Dubai. Ethan was waiting for her at their apartment, but he didn't seem interested in how her trip went. "You're finally back," he said, not even looking up from his phone. Sophie felt guilty, thinking about how Omar had treated her so kindly, while Ethan seemed cold. Days went by, and Sophie tried to keep busy with work and seeing her friends, but nothing felt as exciting as Dubai. Every night, when she closed her eyes, her mind wandered back to Omar and the fun she had in the desert. Lily's phone calls became Sophie's way of staying connected to that magical place. Lily was happy and pregnant now, and she always talked about her new life and how kind her husband was. "Omar asks about you," Lily would say playfully. "He says he's never met anyone like you." Every time Lily mentioned Omar, Sophie's heart skipped a beat, but she felt guilty. She couldn't stop thinking about him, even though Ethan had been with her for so long. Ethan didn't understand. He resented that Sophie had experienced something beyond his control. "Looks like your Arab princess fantasy is over," he said one night after Sophie suggested they try a new restaurant. Then Lily called with big news. She was having a baby. "I want you to be here for the baby," Lily said, excited. Sophie felt both happy for her cousin and nervous. She knew that going to Dubai meant facing her feelings for Omar. Lily's voice was full of happiness, but there was something else in it, too. "It's important to me that you're here," Lily added. The invitation felt like a promise, but also a warning. Sophie knew that accepting it would mean more than just visiting. It would mean confronting the feelings she had for Omar. That night, as Ethan snored beside her, Sophie went outside to the balcony. The city was full of lights, but they didn't seem as bright as the memories of the desert. She closed her eyes and imagined the warm breeze, the smell of spices, and the sound of Omar's laugh. That's when Sophie made her decision. She would go back to Dubai. She told herself it was for her cousin, but deep down she knew it was for herself, too. The preparations for her trip were full of excitement and worry. When she told Ethan, he was as indifferent as always. "Off with the Arabs again," he grumbled, not even looking up from his phone. "Just don't get too used to that life of luxury." The night before her flight, Sophie felt like a teenager getting ready for her first date. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she needed to figure out what she really wanted. The next morning, as the sky turned pink and gold, Sophie packed her suitcase and made up her mind. This trip would be a test, a chance to understand her feelings and make a decision about her future. As Sophie walked toward the taxi that would take her to the airport, she felt like she was leaving behind her old life and stepping into a new, exciting future. The plane landed in Dubai amid a sandstorm, and the city looked like a golden mirage. Sophie's heart raced as she got closer to what would be a life-changing adventure. Lily was waiting for Sophie at the airport. Sophie could see that Lily's belly was bigger now, and her face was glowing with happiness and excitement. The cousins hugged each other for a long time, like they were trying to make up for all the time they had been apart. "You're finally here," Lily said, with tears in her eyes. "I have so much to tell you, so much to show you." The car ride from the airport was a blur of fast talking and laughing. Lily couldn't stop talking about preparing for the baby, how wonderful her husband was, and how great life in Dubai had been. Sophie listened, happy for her cousin, but also feeling something strange inside her. Then, with a secret smile, Lily said, "Abbas has been asking about you. I think he'd love to know you're here." Sophie's heart skipped a beat, and she felt hot all over. The next few days in Dubai were busy and exciting. Sophie helped Lily pick out things for the baby's room, tried new foods at fancy restaurants, and marveled at how Dubai mixed old traditions with new technology. Then, something big happened. Sophie saw Abbas again. It was at a family dinner at Lily's house. It was a small party to celebrate the baby. When Sophie saw Abbas walk in, it felt like time stopped. He looked even better than she remembered. And when their eyes met, Sophie knew that she liked him. They started talking easily, like they had never been apart, and Sophie felt something inside her stir. That night, when Sophie was lying in bed, she made a decision. She secretly bought a new phone and a new number, wanting to talk to Abbas without anyone knowing. Over the next few days, Sophie and Abbas had many secret meetings. He showed her parts of Dubai that most tourists don't see. They went to quiet cafes, art galleries, and watched sunsets over the desert. Every moment with Abbas made Sophie feel more alive. But she also felt guilty. How could she like Abbas when she had a boyfriend, Ethan, back in America? Lily noticed Sophie seemed different, so one afternoon they talked. "You're happier, more alive," Lily said. "It's because of him, isn't it?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She told Lily everything about meeting Abbas, the feelings she was having, and her fear of hurting Ethan. Lily listened and said, "Sometimes love comes when you least expect it." When it feels right, you can't ignore it. You deserve to be happy, Sophie. Those words stuck in Sophie's mind. Later, she made the hardest decision of her life. She called Ethan and broke up with him. Ethan was upset and angry, yelling, "How could you do this to me? We've been together for 5 years. Sophie tried to explain, but he wouldn't understand. His last words were, "This isn't over, Sophie. I won't lose you like this." After the call, Sophie didn't feel the relief she thought she would. Instead, she felt guilty, scared, and yet strangely free. In the days that followed, Abbas was kind and patient with Sophie. He gave her space to think. Lily and her husband were supportive too. Slowly, Sophie allowed herself to enjoy her time with Abbas, and there were no more secrets. She could walk around Dubai with him, kiss him, and dream of their future together. One day, as they walked through a beautiful garden, Abbas stopped under an arch of flowers and took Sophie's hands. He looked at her with love and asked, "Sophie, will you marry me?" Everything else around them disappeared in that moment. Sophie looked into Abbas's eyes and knew she wanted to spend her life with him. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will marry you." They kissed, and Sophie knew her life was changing forever. Afterward, they started planning their wedding. Lily was happy for them and said, "I knew you two were meant to be together." Sophie was excited, but there was still something in the back of her mind, Ethan. He kept sending her messages, sometimes begging, sometimes threatening. One night, while Sophie was having dinner with Abbas, she got another text from Ethan saying, "What we had is stronger than any desert mirage." Sophie shivered but didn't tell Abbas. She didn't want to spoil their happiness. As the wedding day got closer, Sophie threw herself into her new life. She started learning Arabic, explored the city more, and marveled at how old and new things mix so well in Dubai. But sometimes she missed home. She'd smell something that reminded her of her mother's cooking, or see a family from America visiting Dubai, and it would make her feel sad. She wondered if she was giving up too much for this new love. Then, one day, Sophie got a call from her mother. She sounded weak and worried. "Your father had a heart attack," she said. "He's stable now, but he needs surgery. We need you here." Sophie's heart dropped. She needed to go back to America, but she didn't know how to balance her life in Dubai with her family in America. Without thinking, she started packing to fly back that night. Abbas, being kind and understanding, insisted on going with her. "Your family is my family now," he said. "We'll go through this together." They flew back to America, and when they arrived, everything felt so different. The noise, the smells, the people. It was all so familiar, but also so strange after living in Dubai. Sophie's mind was full of thoughts about her father, and she wasn't sure what would happen next. At the hospital, the atmosphere was full of worry and sadness. Sophie walked into the room where her father lay, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily. He used to be so strong and full of life, always there to help and support everyone. But now, he looked fragile and weak, a shadow of the man he had once been. His once lively eyes were closed, and the steady rhythm of the machines was the only sound that filled the room. Her mother sat by his bedside, her face etched with worry. Dark circles under her eyes showed just how exhausted she was, both physically and emotionally. She hadn't slept properly in days, too worried about her husband's health. Sophie's mother embraced both her children tightly when they entered the room, relief flooding her face. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. The days that followed were a blur. Sophie and her brother spent the next few days in the hospital, surrounded by endless doctor consultations, hushed conversations in hospital hallways, and sleepless nights, keeping watch over their father. It felt like time stood still. No matter how much they hoped, they couldn't ignore the fact that her father's condition was serious. They had to stay strong for him, but it was hard, and there was a constant ache in Sophie's heart as she watched her father struggle. Through all of this, Omar remained a constant presence in their lives. He offered quiet support, always ready to lend a hand or listen. His kindness and unwavering dedication helped comfort Sophie and her family during such a difficult time. He didn't need to say much. Just his presence alone brought a sense of calm. Over time, he earned the respect and affection of Sophie's family, who appreciated how much he cared and the way he helped them through this rough patch. One night, when the hospital was quiet and everyone else was asleep, Sophie found herself sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria. She was sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She had just started to relax when she heard a familiar voice. "Sophie?" She turned to find Ethan standing in front of her. For a moment, it felt like time had frozen. They locked eyes, and all the emotions of the years they had shared hung between them, an invisible barrier that neither of them knew how to cross. Ethan looked at her with a mix of pain and resignation. "So it's true," he said quietly, his voice heavy. "You're marrying him, aren't you?" It wasn't really a question. It was more like a realization. He had come to accept the truth, and Sophie could see it in his eyes. He knew now that she was moving forward with her life without him. Sophie opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. How could she explain everything she had been feeling? How could she explain that her heart was now with Omar, a love that made her feel whole in ways she had never imagined? Ethan took a step toward her, his hand reaching out as if he wanted to touch her, but then he stopped. "I hope you're happy," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I really do." And with those words, he turned and walked away, leaving behind 5 years of memories and all that might have been. As Sophie sat there, watching him leave, a sense of finality settled in her chest. That night, as she cried in Omar's arms, she knew that a chapter of her life had ended for good. Letting go of the past was painful, but she also felt a deep sense of certainty. She was on the right path. She was ready to move forward with Omar. The days that followed brought some good news. Sophie's father slowly began to recover. The surgery had been successful, and each day he seemed to get a little better. His eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to sparkle again. One quiet afternoon, as they sat together in his hospital room, he took Sophie's hand in his and glanced at the ring on her finger. He smiled softly, his voice quiet but filled with warmth. "He's a good man," he said. "I can see it in his eyes, in the way he looks at you. He truly loves you." He paused, his eyes misting with tears. "You're going to be very happy, my girl." His voice grew more emotional. "And even if you go far away, you'll always be our daughter." His words were exactly what Sophie needed to hear. She had already known deep down that this was the right decision, but her father's blessing gave her the final push she needed. She now had the support of her family and the love of Omar to carry her forward. With that reassurance, Sophie made up her mind. She would move to Dubai permanently and start her new life with Omar. Her family would always be there, no matter how far away she went. She had their love and support, and that was all she needed. When Sophie returned to Dubai, everything felt different. This time, she wasn't just visiting or passing through. She wasn't a tourist anymore. Dubai was now her home, the place where she would build a future with Omar. As the plane descended toward the city, the lights twinkling in the distance, Sophie felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was where she was meant to be. Omar was waiting for her at the airport. When she saw him, her heart swelled with love and happiness. His smile was warm and welcoming, just like the desert sun. "Welcome home, my love," he said, pulling her into an embrace. In that moment, as she stood in his arms, Sophie knew that she had found her place in the world, the place where she would build the life she had always dreamed of. The months that followed were filled with excitement and anticipation. Sophie and Omar began planning their wedding. Dubai, with its fast pace and ever-changing skyline, felt like the perfect backdrop for their love story. They quickly decided that their wedding would be a blend of American and Arab traditions, honoring both of their cultures. The preparations were a whirlwind, filled with shopping for fabrics, choosing a venue, and picking out every little detail. Omar's family took Sophie on shopping trips to some of the most exclusive boutiques in the city, where they spent hours choosing the perfect fabrics for her wedding gown. The dress would be a masterpiece, a fusion of Western elegance and Arabian opulence. It would be made of white lace, adorned with gold threads, pearls, and crystals that would shimmer in the desert light, making Sophie look like a princess from a storybook. Omar's family was eager to make Sophie feel like a part of their world, and they went out of their way to make sure every detail of the wedding was perfect. As the wedding day approached, Sophie's excitement grew, but so did her anxiety. She couldn't help but worry about her family back in America. Would they truly understand her decision to live so far away? Would they forgive her for choosing a life in another country, so far from everything she had known? One evening, Omar sensed her worries and surprised her with a beautiful gesture. He had arranged a video call with her entire family back in America. Sophie's heart filled with gratitude as she saw the smiling faces of her parents, siblings, aunts, and uncles on the screen. "We couldn't miss your big day, sweetheart," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. "Even if we can't be there in person, our hearts will be with you every step of the way." As Sophie wiped away tears of joy, the last traces of doubt disappeared. She knew now that this was the right choice, and that her family supported her. This was her new life, her new adventure, and she was not alone. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of final preparations. Family and friends from all over the world arrived in Dubai to celebrate with them. The hotel where they were staying buzzed with activity, and guests marveled at the splendor of Dubai and the warmth of the Arab hospitality. The night before the wedding, the women from both families gathered for the traditional henna ceremony. The room was filled with the scent of oils and incense, and skilled artists applied intricate henna designs to Sophie's hands and feet. While the women sang traditional songs and shared advice on married life, the men of Omar's family celebrated in another part of the hotel, laughing and enjoying each other's company. On the morning of the wedding, the sun shone brightly, casting its warm glow over everything. The sky was clear, as if the desert itself was blessing the couple's union. Sophie woke up with her heart pounding, a mix of excitement and nervousness swirling inside her. As she was transformed by stylists and makeup artists into a vision of beauty, she couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come. She had never imagined that just a year ago, she would be here, in Dubai, preparing to marry the man of her dreams. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Lily, glowing in her bridesmaid gown. "It's time," she said with an excited smile. Sophie glanced at her reflection one last time, taking a deep breath, ready to take the most important step of her life. As she walked toward the door, each step brought her closer to Omar, to their new life together, filled with love, adventure, and endless possibilities. The aisle was adorned with beautiful arches of white and gold flowers, creating a fragrant tunnel of beauty. Sophie walked down the aisle, escorted by her father, who had flown in from America just for this special day. As she reached the end of the aisle, Omar stood waiting for her, his face lit up with a smile that could rival the setting sun. In that moment, Sophie knew that this was where she belonged. This was her destiny, her future. The ceremony was a beautiful blend of both cultures, with vows spoken in both Arabic and English. The crowd cheered as they were officially married, and fireworks lit up the sky in celebration. Sophie and Omar held hands tightly, looking into each other's eyes with the promise of a life filled with love, laughter, and new beginnings. That night, as they sat on the balcony of their honeymoon suite, the desert stretched out beneath them, the stars sparkling like tiny diamonds in the sky. They were finally together, and the world felt like it was theirs for the taking. "This is just the beginning," Omar whispered as he kissed her softly. Sophie smiled and looked out at the vast desert, her heart full of gratitude and hope for the future. But little did they know, their love story was about to take an unexpected turn. A storm was brewing on the horizon, and no one could have predicted the dark turn their lives would soon take. The next few minutes were a blur as rescue teams worked hard to free Sophie and her loved ones from the wrecked car. Sophie felt like she was floating between being awake and asleep. Her body hurt, But what hurt the most was the sadness in her heart. Where was Abbas? Why wasn't he answering her? Finally, when they pulled her from the wreckage, the bright sun of the desert hurt her eyes. Through her pain and confusion, she saw people trying to help someone else lying on the ground. Abbas! No pulse. One of the helpers shouted. They started doing CPR. Sophie tried to scream, tried to move, but her body wouldn't listen to her. She was placed into an ambulance, and the sound of the sirens filled her ears as she weakly cried out, "Abbas, please." The trip to the hospital was blurry, like a bad dream. Sophie wanted to stay awake, hoping that it was all just a nightmare she would wake up from. But when she arrived at the hospital, there was chaos everywhere. Doctors and nurses were rushing around, and Sophie was quickly taken to surgery. Hours later, when she finally woke up in the ICU, the first person she saw was her mother, crying. "Mama," Sophie said, her voice weak. "Where is Abbas?" Her mother squeezed her hand, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my sweet girl," she cried. "I'm so sorry." In that moment, Sophie knew without anyone saying it. Abbas was gone. Her love, her future, everything she had dreamed of, was ripped away in an instant. The scream that came from her was the sound of her heart breaking, echoing down the hospital halls. The nurses came in with medicine to try and make her feel better, but nothing could make the pain go away. Abbas was gone, and no amount of medicine could fix that. The next few days were a blur of sadness and pain. Sophie drifted in and out of sleep, her body healing slowly from the crash, but her heart stayed broken. Abbas's family stayed close by her side, grieving their loss as well. His mother, with swollen eyes from crying, would sit with Sophie for hours, holding her hand without saying anything. They didn't need words. Their shared sadness brought them together in a way words couldn't. The crash had made the news everywhere. Newspapers from all over, even from other countries, ran stories about the young couple whose dreams were cut short. The photos from their wedding, just one day before the crash, were now shown next to pictures of the wrecked car at the bottom of a ravine. As Sophie's body healed, the questions about the crash started to grow. There were whispers that something wasn't right. Dubai's police began investigating, but they didn't seem to find any answers. One night, when Sophie couldn't sleep, a detective knocked on her door. He showed her security footage from the day of the crash. In the video, Sophie saw a black car following them and then ramming into their car. She stared at it. It looked like the same kind of car that her ex-boyfriend, Ethan, used to drive back in America. But Ethan was thousands of miles away. He couldn't have been in Dubai. Could he? She couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan might be involved, but it didn't make sense. Could he have followed her all the way to Dubai just to hurt her in Abbas? These thoughts haunted Sophie, and she felt like she needed answers. She promised herself that when she was strong enough, she would find out the truth. Days passed, and Sophie's body slowly healed, but the pain in her heart didn't go away. She couldn't escape the memories of Abbas everywhere she went. At his funeral, dressed in black, Sophie felt numb. It was like she was in a dream, where nothing felt real anymore. But then, something strange happened. She thought she saw Ethan among the mourners. His face was hard to recognize, and when she blinked, he was gone. Had she really seen him, or was it just her mind playing tricks? Either way, the doubt grew even stronger in her. Determined to find out the truth, Sophie worked closely with the police, looking through hours of video, flight records, and hotel logs. She hoped she would find something, anything, that would explain what happened. Her pain and need for answers pushed her to keep going. Even though Abbas's family wanted her to return to America to get away from all the sad memories in Dubai. But Sophie refused. She couldn't leave until she knew the truth. One night, after days of hard work, Sophie received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, like someone was trying to hide their identity. "Not all accidents are accidents," the voice whispered. "Look to the desert, where secrets are buried beneath the sand." The words made Sophie feel cold, but they also gave her hope. Could this be the clue she had been looking for? Without wasting any time, Sophie hired a private investigator who knew Dubai and its secrets. Together, they started uncovering lies and shady business dealings. They found out that the black car that hit them had been rented from a fake company, a company that was linked to some bad business in America. Every new discovery brought Sophie closer to the truth, but it also made her more scared. As they dug deeper, the detective told Sophie that Ethan had been in Dubai for several days before her wedding. He had rented a hotel under a fake name and was following her in Abbas. The detective showed her photographs of Ethan in Dubai, talking to someone in a dark alley and getting into the black car. There was even a phone call between Ethan and someone else, talking about the day of her wedding. Sophie felt her world crashing down around her. Ethan hadn't just followed her to Dubai. He had planned everything to destroy her happiness. But why? Why would he do such a thing? The detective explained, sometimes love can turn into hate. When love twists, it becomes something dangerous. Sophie had no idea how to feel. Ethan's obsession had gone too far. But now, she had to find out why he did it. And she would not stop until she found the truth, no matter the cost. Sophie had learned some shocking things. The detective told her that there was evidence connecting Ethan to a black car that had been rented. People had seen Ethan near the place where the crash happened, and a security camera caught a car like it speeding away right after the accident. Every new fact felt like a hurtful surprise, but Sophie also felt determined. She knew the truth now, and she wouldn't stop until Omar, her late husband, got justice. What do we do now? Sophie asked, her voice shaking but also strong. The detective looked at her seriously. We have enough proof to go to the police. But be warned, once we start this, there's no going back. You could be in danger. Sophie closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered Omar's smile, how happy he was when they got engaged, and how safe she felt in his arms. When she opened her eyes again, they were full of determination. I don't care about the danger, she said. Omar deserves justice, and I won't stop until he gets it. The detective nodded. All right, here's the plan. The next few hours were busy. Sophie and the detective met with the police in Dubai and showed them all the evidence they had. The police acted fast, issuing an arrest warrant for Ethan and putting all the ports and airports on high alert. Sophie was given protection because the police worried Ethan might try to hurt her. She was told to stay safe and limit where she went. For the next few days, Sophie felt scared. Every sound, every shadow made her wonder if Ethan was coming for her. But she also felt calm because, for the first time since the accident, she was doing something that honored Omar's memory. A week later, the news came. The police had found Ethan trying to escape to Oman. There was a chase and even some gunfire, but they caught him. When Sophie saw Ethan, he didn't look like the man she had loved. His face was thin, and his eyes were full of anger and fear. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sophie felt a chill. The trial that followed was a big event. Reporters from all over the world came to cover it. They were interested in the story of Sophie, the widow, the jealous ex-boyfriend, and the tragic accident. Sophie stayed strong during the trial. She spoke about her love for Omar, their plans, and how everything had been destroyed by Ethan's actions. Ethan, on the other hand, couldn't handle all the evidence against him. When he was faced with proof that he caused the crash, he finally admitted it. He said with sadness in his voice, I thought if I couldn't have her, no one should. The judge quickly decided Ethan was guilty. As the police led him out of the courtroom, he looked at Sophie one last time. There was something in his eyes, half begging for forgiveness, half daring her to feel sorry for him. But Sophie didn't flinch. She had gotten justice for Omar, and that's all that mattered. After the trial, Sophie stood still for a moment, thinking about everything. The truth was out, but she still felt empty inside. Dubai, once a place full of happy memories, now felt like a place of sadness. One night, Sophie couldn't sleep. She walked through the quiet streets of the city, thinking about what to do. She knew she couldn't stay in Dubai anymore, but going back to America didn't feel right either. She needed a fresh start, somewhere she could remember Omar without always being reminded of the pain. With a heavy heart, Sophie started making plans to leave. She sold the apartment she had shared with Omar and gave most of the money to a foundation for people hurt in car accidents. She packed up a few things that meant a lot to her, including Omar's wedding ring. Though it was hard to leave, she knew it was something she had to do. Before she left, Sophie visited Omar's grave one last time. She put desert flowers on it, the same kind they had used in their wedding, and stood quietly. "I'll carry you with me always," she whispered, touching his name on the headstone. "I promise to live my life to the fullest for both of us." Then, with one last look at the city, Sophie boarded the plane. She was leaving the city that had seen both her happiest and saddest moments. As the plane took off, she closed her eyes. In her mind, she could still see Omar's smiling face, hear his laugh, and feel his warm hug. For the first time in a while, she smiled. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she would carry the love she shared with Omar to help her through whatever came next. The plane flew into the sky, and as the sun set, Sophie was on her way to a new chapter in her life. Even though her heart still hurt from losing Omar, she knew there would be new adventures ahead. Years went by quietly. Sophie tried to build a new life, far from the painful memories in Dubai. She settled in a small town in southern Spain, where the sun always seemed to shine and the ocean was close by. There, Sophie opened a little art gallery, where she displayed art from local artists and some pieces inspired by her time in the Arab world. Art became a way for her to express all the emotions inside her. This is the story of Sophie, who lost her love but found the courage to seek justice, keep going, and start a new life. If this story made you think or gave you a new perspective, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss our future videos. Let's keep sharing thought-provoking stories and learning from life's lessons together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.